What's the formula for writing a problem statement? What is a how might we question? These are the questions we're answering in episode 2 of Be an Innovator with Design.
Awesome admin.
Hey, awesome admins. If you've been following along, you know we are discovering how to redesign the account page, giving our users that 360-degree view of their customers, leveraging principles of relationship design. In the last episode, we got an introduction to relationship design and the first phase of design thinking, empathy. For episode 2, we are going to dive into the second phase of design thinking. I'm excited to hear from Leanne and Adam about converging and defining the problem.
Thanks, Rebecca. So in the last episode, we gathered feedback from our users in our Quip worksheet. Now we're going to discuss how to make sense of that research in the definition phase. Adam, tell us more.
Thanks, Leanne. In the define phase, you synthesize the feedback you gathered from your users in the first phase, the empathy phase. You then establish a solid problem definition, or what we call is a design challenge. A great definition of your problem statement will guide your team's work and kickstart the third phase, ideation. Some other examples of define phase exercises that you might find are synthesis, drafting problem statements, writing how might we questions, which we'll do today, but also empathy mapping and persona development.
So that makes a lot of sense. I see why this is a really valuable area to spend time on. How do admins go about defining that design challenge?
Yeah, to define the design challenge, we need to define a problem statement. A problem statement highlights the gap between the current experience and the desired experience. Think about the users your solution is for, what their needs are. Review the data you gathered in phase 1. Look for trends and themes across this feedback. For a use case like improving an account page, you might start to see 2 or even 3 general themes across the feedback that you're gathering. If you have a complicated or an involved page, there might be more themes. So we have a handy dandy little formula shown here to help you create and form a problem statement. And I'll walk you through it. It starts off with defining the user and a descriptive statement about your user and what their needs are, and a descriptive verb of what their needs are. And then an insight, some sort of a compelling insight on why they have this need. So here's an example I'll read out. I am a service rep, always on the road, struggling to keep my client calls in order. I need a more efficient way to log calls so I can spend less time at the office and more time with my family. Simple as that.
Awesome. So once an admin's created that problem statement with the formula you shared, what do they do next?
So the next step is writing how might we questions. So once you've identified your design challenge, you can start to generate ideas to solve the challenge. These how might we questions or unlock the next phase, ideation, where you'll explore ideas, which can help you solve your design challenge in an innovative way. So an example of a how might we question might be, how might we collect call notes so users don't have to rely on memory? So again, simple as that. So generate a handful of how might we questions and have you, based on the data that you gathered and your problem statement, and have your end users vote on their favorite. The most voted on how might we question is your ideation phase challenge.
So it really sounds like these problem statements and how might we questions are going to help us discover hidden challenges and their solutions that we may not have previously thought about.
That's correct, Leanne. They help keep your team on track and moving in the right direction. They confirm, what you are hearing from your users and show that they are being heard, and ultimately leads to building rapport and trust. Also, without a clear design challenge, your project will lack focus and your final experiences will likely suffer.
And without a clear problem statement and design challenge vision, it can be really hard to explain to stakeholders and users what your goals even are.
That's correct. This creates more value for our users in the company because we're able to solve for the underlying problems and not just the surface issues as well.
Okay, so we're ready to take our user research and define our design challenge. Let's dive into our demo scenario. So we're back in our Quip worksheet in the exercise 2 area. define the challenge. In Quip, I'm establishing my problem statement or design challenge based on insights that I've gathered from users. So my problem statement or design challenge is that account executives are context switching all day. They want a simple and frictionless access to their Customer 360 account data because current time on task is causing lost productivity. Now that I have my design challenge or my problem statement, I'm going to take that next step that Adam talked about, soliciting feedback from my end users. So I've got it here in my worksheet in Quip, and I can see that Adam, my end user, is using an emoji to react to this statement and also adding some helpful comments. This is one way that you can work with your users to get feedback on those statements and make sure that you're on the right path. Now that I've gotten positive confirmation from my users that this problem statement resonates with them, I'm going to generate a selection of how might we questions in the Quip poll. My examples of how might we questions are things like how might we prioritize screen data so users don't have to search, and how might we design a more informative view of our customers' account data. You can write these questions for yourself and for your users, or you can use the questions that we've put together. Now that I've got all of my how might we questions in my Quip poll sections, I'm going to ask my users to vote on them. So this is where Adam mentioned that most voted on how might we question is my ideation phase challenge. So for those of you working with your end users in this exercise, this is where you can gather feedback from them. Even if you aren't gathering feedback from all of your users, if you have a Salesforce super user who often shares feedback with you about their Salesforce experience, try this exercise with them. If you're not working with your users yet in this exercise, try to imagine what questions your users would respond to, or use this time to develop some questions you may want to ask your users in the future. In summary, this exercise will help us synthesize the feedback we're getting from our users and turn it into app building. Back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Leanne and Adam, for sharing your insights. All right, so some key takeaways I have are: one, we should establish a problem statement that highlights a gap between our current experience and our desired experience. Next, we should synthesize the feedback we gathered from our users to create that final problem statement. And lastly, let's start generating ideas for solving the challenge using how might we questions. All right, so now it's your turn. Complete the Define the Challenge worksheet to create your design challenge or problem statement using that formula we provided, and create at least 2 how might we questions or statements. And lastly, conduct a how might we poll to see which questions your users find most interesting. So want to dive deeper and learn some more? Check out the UX Research Basics Trailhead module listed in the Trail Mix. The link is right here. And then join us for episode 3 of Being Innovator with Design, where we learn how to ideate on solutions.